Hello everybody, welcome to this week's episode of The County Seat. I'm your host, Chad Booth. A couple of weeks ago, there was an article in the Deseret News. It talked about eminent domain. The situation is that a small municipality condemned property using eminent domain, then turned the property over to another private individual to develop the property so that they could increase their tax base. Now, this on the surface would sound unconstitutional, but the U.S. Constitution does provide for eminent domain as long as the parties are justly compensated. That is going to be the topic of our show today. We will discuss it as it relates to the state of Utah. But first, we ought to give you a little background on exactly what eminent domain is and the process by which it takes place. For that, we turn now to Terry Wood.
Life, liberty, and property. John Locke coined that phrase, and it's become a part of our American tapestry, rights that seemingly cannot be taken away. But when it comes to property, that right may not be as absolute as you might think.
Eminent domain is one of the most controversial and unpopular functions of government. It's the power to acquire land from private citizens for public purposes. While the practice is disliked, it is a necessary evil for many of the conveniences we take for granted.
The government needs infrastructure, roads, power lines, things like that, even things like park, waterworks. Eminent domain is the way that the government acquires the land for those things, and so they can go to a private property owner and they can purchase that land for them for just compensation, and that land can be put to public use. It's not the government coming and just taking land. The Constitution of the United States says that the government shall not take land for public purposes without just compensation. So they cannot just come in and take it, they have to pay for it.
Just compensation is understood as the fair market value of the property, but that doesn't take into account family history or sentimental attachments. Just because that old farmhouse has been in your family for 5 generations doesn't mean it's safe from an eminent domain purchase.
Now, a citizen who's facing condemnation of their property through eminent domain is not left alone to figure it all out by themselves. There is the State Office of Property Rights Ombudsman, and it's this office's job to facilitate, mediate, and help you understand this process.
You don't have to accept just what is offered to you. You have the ability to negotiate. You have the ability to get an appraisal for your own appraisal in order to determine what the property is actually worth and what you are owed.
Under Utah law, the condemner has a legal obligation to enter into good faith negotiations with the private property owners to try to purchase the land. If agreements cannot be reached, eminent domain takes effect.
And sometimes those discussions are very fruitful. People will sell the land, they can agree on a price, that's fine, but sometimes not. And that's when you have to go to the next step, which is where you begin condemnation proceedings. You may have to file a lawsuit, you may have to get appraisals, all that kind of stuff to figure out what the land is worth. And in any time in that process, a property owner can call the Office of the Property Rights Ombudsman to get help. The eminent domain law can be complicated. We work with it every day. We can help you understand it. We can help you negotiate it. We can help you know what your options are.
The process of eminent domain is messy, but in the end, the goal is to build infrastructure that will serve the greatest public good with the least impact to private property. But the more you know about the process going in, the better it will turn out for everyone involved. For the County Seat, I'm Terry Wood.
Thanks, Terry. We will find out a little bit more about eminent domain in our panel discussion in just a minute. We will talk about what Utah is doing and what steps they are taking to make sure that eminent domain is always cautiously used and compensated for justly. We'll return with the County Seat in just a minute.
Almost 45% of the oil produced in Utah, 7.8 million barrels, comes from Duchesne County. That oil feeds our state economy, provides job growth, and supports local business. Here in Duchesne County, we're working to make Utah an economic, cultural, and technological leader. Whether you're here for business or pleasure, Duchesne County will welcome you with open arms and invite you to explore all the beauty of the Uinta Mountains. Duchesne County, close enough for business, far enough to get away.
There's no need to travel far to find that perfect family adventure. Welcome to Utah's Nebo Loop Scenic Byway, 38 miles of winding highway through the southern end of the Wasatch Mountains. Join us in Juad County. It'll change your family forever.
Carbon County is typically known for its industry and coal production. But did you know Utah's Castle Country has something for everyone? The motocross track has been acclaimed as the most popular in Utah with a variety of technical and natural terrain, and it even includes a pee-wee track. Visit castlecountry.com for more information.
Welcome back to the county seat. We're talking about eminent domain, a topic that most people don't understand. We hope that the beginning of our program shed a little light on the process of eminent domain, but we are here to discuss it. Joining us from the Utah State Legislature, District 29, Representative Lee Perry. From the Utah Association of Counties, an attorney for their staff, Adam Troop. And we have Brent Bateman, who is the lead attorney for the State Office of the Property Rights Ombudsman.
Very good.
Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today.
Glad to be here.
What I would like to talk about is historically the problems that we encounter. Obviously, anytime eminent domain comes into play, it's an adversarial relationship, because usually a municipality or a state has tried to negotiate for a piece of property that they feel they need. That has failed, and then they go through the eminent domain process. What is the first reaction that hits your office?
First reaction that people get when they call my office is confusion and puzzlement and worry, frankly, because this thing that they've heard of, eminent domain, has come to them. Now their land, which is vital to them, so important, their livelihood, their life is there, is being taken away from them for a public purpose. And so when they call my office, they want to know what's happening. They want to know what the process is going to be and what they can do about it in order to just survive it. It's a scary thing, and when it happens to people, they're never happy. It's never a happy thing.
I was going to say, one other factor here that I learned as a legislator is most people in our state don't even realize we have a state land ombudsman. That's somebody the legislature's put in place to help the citizens understand the idea of eminent domain and how it may impact or may not impact them. And so that's part of my goal as a legislator, is to try and bring forward and let people know that that's what Brent's job is to be there to help the citizens understand this process.
I can help them know what's happening, and I can let them know what their options are. Help them know what the best reaction is. And then when it comes time to actually negotiate with folks, I can help them know the best way to negotiate. I can help provide them with the tools to negotiate successfully. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get people the just compensation, which is what they're entitled to under the Constitution of the United States. If eminent domain comes, you're entitled to just compensation, and what we're trying to do is help them get that, make sure that they're treated fairly and properly.
So a question for you, as you have worked on this issue in your 2 terms in the legislature, and you're very concerned about it, what are some of the tricky areas that come up as far as people look at their property and they're going to take a portion of it or all of it, and you know, their thoughts are, well, I should be made whole. Where are some of the drawbacks that still remain?
Well, one of the things I've kind of learned in this process is not always do they take the land or all of the land. Quite often we have, for purposes of utilities, they take an easement rather than actually taking of the land. And so, but that does cause some possible devaluation of the land, and that's where they become concerned, is they say, well, I don't want the land anymore if they're going to do this and put it across here. But there's no reason the utility doesn't need to keep the land either. So it's a balancing act that we have to follow. It's kind of the old Star Trek thing, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. That's really what eminent domain is really all about. And so that's the frustrating part, is to try and educate the public as to the needs that we have as a society to take care of each other. And that's where, like I said, we have to bring in everybody involved, because I've had those happen within my district, and I've had citizens come to me. That's why never personally impacted me, but I have constituents that are very frustrated by the way eminent domain has been used, and so therefore I either send them to Brent, or one of the things that we've discovered during this last year is not trying to figure out who. We've got to get away from that concept. Everybody keeps going, well, who can declare eminent domain? And what we've discovered is we have to be able to list as legislators, why should people be able to declare eminent domain? And that's what we're really been working on last year, and especially into this next legislative session, is to really define the whys. And sometimes those are going to change over time with the way our society changes, but that's what we're really working towards.
And if I could add to this,
Sure.
I think we've talked about the concept of taking property, and I think the important thing to recognize under the state statutes relating to eminent domain is we're not talking about actually taking property. We're talking about coming to an agreement on what just compensation is for that transfer of property, whether it's the transfer of a right to the property or transfer of the actual full property. So the statutes we have in place are intended to help with that balance and to help protect the constitutional rights of the property owner. But sometimes government gets into a situation where they're in conflict with a member of the public, and that's why we need the process that we're working on now. How do we sort through that is the issue.
So what are some of the situations, you know, we talk about partial, we talked about an easement. If they take part of the land and people had plans for that, how do you legally determine the value of that property?
Well, unfortunately, the only way we have to determine the value of a property is through an appraisal. Appraisal is an inexact science. So what usually happens is when a condemnor needs property, whether it be a full parcel of property or just a partial, say they're taking for a road and they just need a strip along the side, they'll do an appraisal of that property and determine what the fair market value of that property is. Sometimes those appraisals are good, sometimes they're bad. One thing that my office commonly does is it provides people with an opportunity to get a second appraisal from an independent appraiser. The reason why that's helpful is because, first of all, it gives you like a second opinion. If you're going to a doctor and you want to know what things are wrong. But another reason why that's helpful is it gives the property owner a feeling of, I have something I can control. They're telling me what my property's worth. I'm not sure I believe them, so how can I really find out? And so we can get them another appraisal of that property so that we're sure that they're getting just compensation. And that's part of what Adam talked about is we're trying to make this happen in the best way possible for everybody. And if we can use some of those tools to come to an agreement, then that is the best for everybody, for the condemnor, the condemnee, and everyone else.
What is the basis on which that compensation takes place? That would become my next question. If somebody had planned to build a 10-house subdivision and they take a third of the property, they'll only be compensated for the third, and it won't take into account the value that would have otherwise come forward in their intended use.
Actually, there's three parts to what compensation is owed in eminent domain. First of all, you're paid for the land that's actually taken. You're paid for the strip or for the entire parcel, whatever the fair market value for that is. You're also, however, paid for severance damages, which is whatever's left behind if they only take a part of it, how much that diminishes in value. If that goes from $10 an acre to $9 an acre, that has to be paid as well. That's part of compensation. And the third part is damages that incur. If in the process something happens, a fence is torn down, crops are damaged, those also have to be paid for, and all three of those are part of compensation in eminent domain.
Okay, I think we're off to a good start on this. We'll be back with the county seat. We will talk about some of the legislative changes and the historical changes that have taken place in Utah on eminent domain. You're watching the county seat. We'll look for you right after this commercial break.
Carbon County is typically known for its industry and coal production, but that's not all. Utah's Castle Country has something for everyone. Carbon Country Club Golf Course, with 18 great holes of perfectly manicured fairways and pristine greens, is second to none. And with 4 sets of tees, the whole family can enjoy our golf course. Plus, if you hit it bad enough, you might even find some Indian pictographs hidden in the cliffs above the 18th hole. Visit castlecountry.com for more info.
Kanab, base camp for your southern Utah adventures. You belong in Kanab.
Who It's me, honey. Did you let me in?
Well, not unless you got your whooping cough booster shot to protect our baby.
I forgot.
Your dinner's on the porch.
Find out where you can get vaccinated at stopwhoopingcough.org.
There's no need to travel far to find that perfect family adventure. Welcome to Yuba Reservoir. Boating, fishing, camping, and ATV trails await your next visit. Join us in Juad County. It'll change your family forever.
If you're looking for the center of the universe, well, good luck. Now, if you're looking for the center of the off-road universe, look no further than Paiute County. Hundreds of miles of trails turn your day of riding into a week, maybe even a month. Heck, a lifetime wouldn't be enough. Take off right from downtown Marysville or Circleville and experience fall colors that rival the most famous destinations in the world. There will never be a better time to ride the Paiute Trail than right now. Explore Paiute County and discover the magic and beauty of the land where the rainbow ends.
Welcome back to the County Seat. Our conversation today is about eminent domain, and we're talking about a newspaper article that occurred, or we saw in the Deseret News last week. This article talked about another state back east, I believe it was Virginia, and they are making a court challenge within the state about private eminent domain, where eminent domain is actually declared by a city or municipality and then turned around and given to another private property holder because they will develop the property where the previous owner couldn't and create a tax base for the municipality. But that does bring up a question out in the West, particularly with the railroad history. What about private eminent domain? Because that's very shocking to some people, apparently.
The private right of eminent domain, it does surprise people when people find out that you don't have to be government to do eminent domain, but it's common. Rocky Mountain Power, other utilities, those are not government entities, but they have to do eminent domain for public uses. Power lines, pipelines. It started back in the railroad days. It's very common also with waterways. I mean, we all want the water to come around and for various reasons, and so people have the private right to do eminent domain in order to get the water conveyed to them.
Have you found this in your research, Lee?
I have. Actually, that's what was interesting is we started to look at this law and started to say, okay, what do we need to do to change the whys? And I started to look at some of the whys. One of the whys was we're going to let people declare eminent domain to put telegraph towers up. Well, we don't use telegraph towers anymore, so that's definitely something that needs to go out. And what got me involved last year was when I first started running this legislation last session, the one thing we accomplished last year, we removed private developers. That was something the legislature allowed and put in, and we said we can't specifically eke out a spot and say private developers can go in and declare it themselves. They would have to kind of step through the process of working through county governments or governments for the very reasons you're talking about, if it were to happen. And that's the nice thing about the political system. It's far less likely to happen if you start to work through somebody who's an elected official than it is if it's just people who are in it for the business purposes.
So you brought up a very interesting scenario because counties typically, and we're going to talk about this more in the next segment, really aren't engaged that much directly in eminent domain. But you were saying that sometimes municipalities step outside of their city for like a sewage treatment plant, and then they ask the county to engage in eminent domain for their purposes.
Under the law in Utah, a municipality or the state can do eminent domain outside of its own boundaries. So if you have a city, maybe it's all built out and maybe they need more infrastructure, they can go outside of the city boundaries into another city or into a county area, acquire property for whatever they need. And I get a lot of questions about that kind of thing too. It's a concern to counties sometimes. You know, county people get calls from their citizens. I'm not in this city. Why do I have to give up my land for these folks?
Is that troublesome from the county's perspective?
Well, I think the entire issue can be troublesome from any governmental entity's position, as you're certainly going to have a negative response frequently from people unless they're happy to give their land and think they can sell it for a purpose that they didn't previously have. But there is a political aspect to it that people are going to have to sort of bear the arrows that are shot at them from people who are saying, why are you doing this and why are we taking this route? So yes.
Lee, do you have more that you're planning to do in this upcoming session with eminent domain?
Yes, in fact, we've been meeting as a large group of individuals, everybody involved. the folks that might declare eminent domain, as well as those who are private property owners saying, we may not want you to declare eminent domain. We've had them all in the room, governments, counties, cities, all those folks discussing this issue, and we're really trying to hone down and define the why. We've been able to go back to the legislature and say, we're not messing with the who. We may take a few who's out that don't belong there anymore, but we're really going to figure out the why, and that's what we've been working on. So yeah, this next session we will be back with some more legislation. In fact, this next interim, we hope to introduce the bill that we have proposed to make some really significant modifications, I think, that will be beneficial to the citizens, but also will be helpful for those who have to declare eminent domain, so they don't come out to be quite the villain that sometimes they get portrayed to be.
These changes will help everybody, I think. They do a lot to help the private citizens who have eminent domain happening to them, but it also provides a lot of guidance for people who need to condemn and helps them to understand how they can do it and still protect property rights.
Again, I'd like to remind everybody that this process of eminent domain, this isn't the first course of action. Usually the entities try to negotiate a reasonable and usable price. Is that not correct?
That's exactly what we're putting in this legislation. We want them to go that route before they start going into eminent domain.
All right, we'll pick up that conversation right after this commercial break. You're watching a series on eminent domain here on the county seat. We'll look for you on the other side of the commercial break.
Skiing is expensive, right? Well, how about we do something about that? Eagle Point, Southern Utah's premier resort located right outside of Beaver, Utah, is proud to announce $25 lift tickets all season long. Ski and snowboard Utah's newest resort for the lowest price, and find out why the Point, with its family-friendly staff and great atmosphere, will become your second home. $25 lift passes all season. Go to eaglepointresort.com for eligibility and restrictions. 5 lifts, 40 named runs, 1,500 vertical feet. Endless possibilities. Eagle Point Resort.
Kanab, base camp for your southern Utah adventures. You belong in Kanab.
Unlimited opportunity for adventure. It's all about knowing where to look. ATV adventures, rock crawling events, art festivals, and wildlife events. The opportunities are limitless. Pick your adventure in Millard County.
There's no need to travel far to find that perfect family adventure. Welcome to Yuba Reservoir. Boating, fishing, camping, and ATV trails await your next visit. Join us in Juab County. It'll change your family forever.
Welcome back to the county seat. Our topic today has been eminent domain. One element that we haven't looked at, because so far we've covered eminent domain, and probably as viewers, still in the back of your mind is the government comes in and they condemn the property for their own self-interest. But sometimes in the county cases, eminent domain from a government side has a negative impact to local government. Adam, would you explain that a little bit?
Well, I've already mentioned the political aspect of having to defend what you're doing if there's a public outcry or public complaint about that. So that's certainly a part of what the burden is on the community. But the other part is that in fact, when land is taken for a public purpose and then donated to that public purpose, dedicated to that public purpose, it is essentially taken off the tax rolls. Or alternatively, if an easement is granted, then the value of that property probably drops in some way or other because they've lost a certain portion of their right to that property. And that means that a determination of what the property tax value is and what the valuation is for the purpose of property tax is reduced. That's also a burden that then is borne by the entire community. So again, we're in this situation of a balancing of interest. What interest is being supported by taking that property and paying compensation? What's the public purpose? And does that equal out or outweigh the cost that's going to come to the community as a result of that? So we have a lot of questions that have to be taken into account, a lot of discussion that has to take place, and I think that and the main process and the fact that people have a right to go and challenge what the county is doing or the governmental entity is doing makes the process properly burdensome for everyone, really.
Was this where your first exposure came to eminent domain? Is about some of these easements and?
It was. Like that's what came about. Is the former state land ombudsman lives in my house district, and he called me, and I didn't even realize that we had a state land ombudsman to start with. That was a huge issue to me, and found out what they do and how beneficial it was. But I had a lot of constituents who were upset because their property, an easement went through their property, which to some level devalued their property. Now they want their property reassessed at a lower level because they're not going to be able to develop things. Nobody wants to be under a great big power line. Nobody wants to build a house there, and you're not going to be able to have the value that you would if you built a house there. And they're saying, hey, we want this devalued, so I'm not paying as much in property taxes, which in fact occurs on, then it hurts the counties, the schools. There's a lot of people that can be negatively impacted. So we have to be concerned about that.
And I think you could essentially say that when that kind of valuation changes, what's happened essentially is the entire community has sort of reassessed that lost value. So the public purpose is paid for by the entire community, paying for that lost value in addition to the compensation paid to the landowner.
Is there any way to come up with a formula as to what is the higher and best use? Or is that tough?
Appraisers have been trying to do that for a long time. They've got a good grip on it, but it's still kind of an elusive, more of an art than a science, unfortunately.
Well, in the last minute and a half that we've got, I would actually like to turn our attention to your office because, as Representative Perry said, he didn't know about the office, even though it's been around for 10 years. I didn't know about it until we went to set up this taping of this show today. So let's find out a little bit from you about the importance of your office, what you do, and when people should come contact you.
Well, I appreciate that. The purpose of the Ombudsman's office is to help people when they have conflicts with the government over their land, and eminent domain is a major part of that. Most government entities who have worked with us have found that we've been helpful for any number of reasons, primarily because we try to keep people out of court. We try to give people options and help them find ways to get their solutions without having to hire attorneys, without having to go through the litigation process. If a county or some kind of entity needs to do eminent domain, they don't do it every day, they can call my office and we'll do what we can to help them understand what property rights are, understand how they can do it in a successful way, and especially if a property owner finds that eminent domain has come to their doorstep. Call me. I will spend as much time on the phone with you as I need to. I will help you understand what your options are. I'll provide you with an appraisal, with mediation services, and we'll try to help this whole process happen in a way that serves you, that gets you just compensation for your land with as little problem as possible.
All right, very good. And on that note, we'd like to thank you all for watching. You can go to our website, thecountyseat.tv, watch the program again. You can also leave your comments for us on our Facebook page. That link also is on our website. We enjoy and would welcome your participation, your comments, and we'll give you some links to get in touch with the State Ombudsman's Office. Thank you so much for joining us today on The County Seat. We'll look for you next week. Remember, local government is where your life happens. Be involved, be engaged, and we'll look for you next week on The County Seat.